we'll cover a few logistics. So now all you guys are in listen only mode, and the video will be available that we are recording right now. So that'll be online in about a week. And the PDF for the presentation is available now on the energycodes.gov webpage. So feel free to follow along or download that to take a look later. You guys, yeah, like I was saying, everyone's in just listen only mode. So you still can ask those questions. We ask that you please do that with the Q&A function in Zoom. So we'll kind of be monitoring the Q&A pane, and at the end of all of our speakers today, we'll go through those questions and try and cover as many as we can. Any that we don't, we'll try to get some answers for you guys as well. And finally, we have CEUs available from AIA and ICC for everyone attending this webinar today. At the very end of the session, we will have a link that you can fill out and request to get AIA credits or that certificate for self-reporting to ICC or other professional organizations. So once you fill that out, you'll get an email with that certificate of completion after the webinar. So keep an eye out for that link. That'll be at the end after all of our panelists today. So this webinar is part of the Building Energy Codes Program webinar series, which takes place the third Thursday of each month at 1 p.m. Eastern. So here are a list of some of our other upcoming webinars. As you can see, we have a few more going into the spring of 2024. If you go on that website, you can read the descriptions and learn a little bit more about what will be covered in the webinars. Our next one is going to be November 16th, and that's going to go kind of a deep dive into ASHRAE 90.1 2022. We're taking a break in December, and then we'll continue once a month. So keep a lookout for those. Go to that website and register and attend just like today. And it'll be the same deal with CEUs and all that available as well. So we have some awesome speakers. I'm going to start us off with just a couple of slides, and then we'll get to our speakers today. So we just want to say welcome to everyone here. And of course, our speakers will start out with Monica Guevara from Emerald Cities Collaborative. Next will be Andy Winslow with the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships, and then Maggie Kelley Riggins from Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance. All right, I'm going to kick us off with a few slides, and then we'll get to our other speakers. So yeah, I'm just going to highlight a couple of the current DOE-funded workforce development programs that are happening right now. I think it'll be a good thing to learn a bit more about some other programs before we dive into our speakers programs that we have. And I'm sorry if you're hearing this music every time I change. I don't know where it's coming from. But let's just go with it. So the first program I want to talk about is the Building Energy Education, or BEE Fundamentals Training Program. This program is developed by the Smart Energy Design Assistance Center at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And it runs in partnerships with the states of Hawaii, Nevada, and Illinois. Go back. The program teaches energy code basics with the intent to prepare students for building code and energy efficiency careers. As you can see, a lot of cool topics. Some of them include energy efficient HVAC, lighting, envelope practices and standards. And something that's really neat about this program is that the materials are specifically geared towards providing this energy code information to community college stakeholders. So specifically community college instructors, and then obviously students that are taking classes at the community college as well. So some of the materials that they provide, there's a free toolkit for community college or trade program instructors. So you can run the entire course with the toolkit. or you can kind of integrate the topics into existing courses. Includes videos, worksheets, presentations, in-class activities, and instructor support. So kind of, if you don't feel like you can do this yourself as an instructor, there's something that exists that you can kind of plug in, and it's really, really helpful. So obviously this is really important because educating young people on energy efficiency and introducing them to careers in the field is really necessary to grow that codes workforce, especially as we see demand for the labor is growing and a lot of people retiring and taking their experience and knowledge with them. So this is a really cool program. The next one I want to highlight is the Nebraska Energy Codes Training Program. This one's run by the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, or MIA. MIA is a nonprofit regional energy efficiency organization, and they've run this program since 2020. It'll end in January of 2024. And the program really grew in response to the state of Nebraska updating their energy code from an amended 2009 IECC, or International Energy Conservation Code, to the unamended 2018 ICC. So obviously that was a really big jump in code requirements, and the program works to kind of train the workforce on these updated requirements, anyone that interacts with the code. And the audience is like I said, anyone who interacts with the code, so builders, contractors, design professionals, code officials, but also students, public officials, and academics. And the topics include kind of those basics of the new requirements in the 2018 code, in addition to kind of those underlying building science principles, why this is a requirement, and then advanced technologies, as a lot of builders in Nebraska were already kind of using those advanced technologies. And in addition to training, the program also includes a circuit rider or a code consultant to kind of do that more one-on-one work with people in the field, a duct and envelope tightness verifier training, or DET, and a train the trainer aspect so that the workforce can continue to train itself. And then also a community college element, just like BEE fundamentals at the Metropolitan Community College. So doing some residential and commercial energy code courses there online. And there's a link at the bottom if you want to learn more about that program, and any of the other programs that I mentioned. There'll be links as well for those. Final one I'm going to talk about is another code training program. This one is run by Newport Partners. It is the Next Gen Energy Code Training Program that whose aim is to train up that growing workforce, create energy efficient, resilient, healthy buildings. And in order to do that, there's this strong focus on energy codes to create these types of buildings. So the audience is similar to the Nebraska program. Builders, architects, engineers, laborers, and but it also includes the building owners and managers. So not only those involved in the design and construction of new buildings or retrofits, but it also targets building owners and managers of existing buildings. And trainings are offered both in person and online. They create these really targeted trainings to these specific audiences, which runs from really introductory courses up to intermediate and advanced topics. And they also do a lot of work with career opportunities. So here's the training, and then how can you do more with your career within these industries that interact with the code. And there's a list of some of these topics here that are pretty interesting, and the link at the bottom as well if you want to learn more about the Next Gen Energy Code Training Program. I have one more slide for you, and then we'll get moving on. So in addition to these programs, we also have a number of projects that were funded through the bipartisan infrastructure law to support more resilient and efficient building codes. So with this funding, all the states in the US are supported either directly or indirectly through a national collaborative or regional TA programs. And workforce development is really at the center of many of these newly funded projects. So There's quite a lot more workforce investment coming in the area, and much more to look forward to. And once again, we got that link at the bottom. Please click that and learn more about what's going on in your state or region. All right, so this is me. Feel free to email me with any questions. You'll be getting all your stuff from me later, links and certificates and stuff as well. And please check out the Building Energy Codes program at energycodes.gov. We have a lot of information there, including some great infographics and information around cost effectiveness around codes. So thanks again. I'm going to stop talking and pass it over to our awesome speakers. First up is Monica Guevara from Emerald Cities Collaborative. Monica, if you want to take the screen for me and start sharing your slides. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So hi, welcome, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're at. My name is Monica Guevara. I am Program Manager of Economic Inclusion at Emerald Cities Collaborative. So just give you a quick kind of brief intro into who we are and then kind of get started. So a little bit about us. Emerald Cities Collaborative is a nonprofit organization. We've been around for probably about 14, 15 years now. So national in scope, but really focused on kind of these regional hubs that are primarily urban and coastal in nature. So I myself am located in Seattle, and then we also have people that are in North California, Southern California, the Northeast, as well as DC. So where we really work is at the juncture of environment and racial equity. So we really believe in greening our cities, building our communities, strengthening our democracy, and making sure that everyone has equal and equitable access to all of those. So a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today is really addressing workforce in a very broad sense. We're going to go into kind of like how we define that, looking at the challenges that workforce faces, and also talking about some solutions. And this won't be the be all end all, but this will be the 30,000 foot look at all of those. So internally at Emerald Cities, when we talk about workforce, we're talking about a couple different things, and especially as it applies to energy codes. So we really look at workforce both in terms of the employees or the potential employees that could compose that workforce, as well as the contractors or the owners of the companies doing that work. So we work in both aspects. And when I talk about workforce, I'm really being inclusive of both of those communities. Also, for the most part, we're talking about trades in the construction. So any of your mechanical, electrical, plumbing, MEP trades, weatherization, especially those that do insulation, air sealing, all that kind of good stuff. So kind of talking about workforce in a fairly broad sense. And then a little bit of context setting. We're just going to discuss a couple of diversity facts out there. So basically, within construction, diversity is a little bit complicated. We have, kind of one outlier of, the Latinx population really being overrepresented in construction overall, but they're not overrepresented in positions of management or in highly skilled trades. They tend to be laborers. They tend to have kind of the lower paid, lower wage, lower skilled jobs. And then for every other minority population, and women in particular, they're very underrepresented in construction. So for the most part, when we're looking at those highly skilled, really well-paid trades, when we're looking at construction management positions, all those positions are still kind of really widely held by white male individuals. So when we look right now at, the type of work environment and kind of like tension between supply and demand of workforce, most construction companies, most contractors are having a hard time, or it is a tight labor market right now. What we see happening is that with the federal programs, IRA and others that are coming down, it's going to make that tight labor market even tighter and harder to find, good workforce that, you can retain within your company. So this makes meeting our goals of clean energy and of decarbonization really, really challenging. The other kind of interesting fact is that white managers and supervisors tend to hire and promote fewer BIPOC workers. They tend to hire and promote people that look like themselves. So kind of, knowing some of these facts, working with some of these facts, we're kind of going to look at some of the solutions and some of the things that we're working on to hopefully resolve some of this tightness in the labor market, and also promote equity from, for those trades. So this is a really great quote that I love. This is by Gilbert Campbell and Harry Johnson. So they are a CEO of a national minority-owned renewable energy firm. And I love that it comes from a minority-owned firm, and is really saying, like, we've been able to be successful in an environment that, isn't really designed for our success. So, we have the talent, we have the skill, we have the know-how to really be able to contribute to these clean energy environments. So if you let us, we will come in and show you what we can do, kind of thing. So I just really appreciated that and kind of took that to heart. And I think we all take it to heart in terms of our work. So right now I want to get a little bit into some of the challenges that we're having. One on the workforce side of the employee side, and the other on the employer side. So for this slide, basically some of the unique challenges that are faced by BIPOC women, and this may be faced by others as well, but it's particularly, poignant for these communities, is that, the career pathways to enter the workforce are very opaque. The other thing that comes and factors into that is this idea of informal networks. So if I don't know anyone that works in HVAC, it's really hard for me to know what the day-to-day work life is like. It's really hard for me to know what the, pay is like, or, whether it would be a good career path for me. So just even having that lack of informal networks and access to what those careers and what that work style is like makes it really hard to know that it's even an option for me. The other thing is just even retention. So we notice that there's a lot of apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs, but retention is really a challenge with minority and women within those programs. So kind of addressing the reasons for that and how we can alleviate some of those pressures. The other dynamic that we see is that those that do successfully make their way through apprenticeship programs and, become journey level and become workforce within these different trades, oftentimes are looking at entrepreneurship as another option. So this is where we see minority and women-owned businesses kind of have higher levels of representation than even their overall representation in that particular trade and workforce. So we think it's usually because they want independence, they want freedom, they maybe are being stifled in their career, they maybe are not, getting moved up and promoted as they think they should. So they really strike out on their own to create those opportunities for themselves. So the entrepreneurship option is being looked at as really a mechanism to open up career pathways for themselves, as opposed to really a choice and a first choice in some of these instances. So that's another thing that we look at, and that's another reason why we focus also on the contractor side, almost the demand side of the employment puzzle. And then switching gears a bit, when we think about contractors and their challenges, the challenges that are particularly felt by BIPOC and women-owned businesses, we think about, the wealth disparity and how that can kind of really have this just cascading effect on all other aspects of their business. Everything from, just less startup capital, less capital to expand, less rainy day funds for when something goes wrong, for when something doesn't get paid on time, limited access to networks and resources. So whether it be, networks in terms of potential clients, whether it be networks in terms of government agencies and officials, whether it be networks in terms of just other mentors and people in the industry. This can all have that kind of also cascading effect. And also, kind of goes back to that idea of informal networks and how those networks are really one of the mechanisms that help people start into an industry and grow within that industry. Other things that can have another effect are just within smaller operations and organizations, it can be particularly hard to make it profitable, especially if there's burdensome administrative costs or time. So we see this a lot, for example, in work that the smaller companies do with public agencies. So the ability to do certified payroll, the ability to do prevailing wage, the ability to work on more than one project at a time can be especially burdensome for smaller organizations. And we find that BIPOC-owned, women-owned construction firms tend to be smaller, tend to have less employees, tend to be less profitable. I think part of that is that those administrative costs are really not being shared amongst, larger revenue scales and revenue bases. So the more we can, help and sustain those contractors to start and grow, the more organizations we have for minority and women-owned employees to go to be hired, to be elevated in, to be promoted within. So that's another angle that we look at and that we encourage. So one of the things we work on, and you noticed in my title is Program Manager of Economic Inclusion. So a little bit of what we're talking about that is really being proactive, is really taking the steps to make sure that our market, especially the clean energy and sustainable building market, is open and equitable to anyone, regardless of where they come from, race, ethnicity, gender, family background, age, etc. And we really think that this is another way or another mechanism to really invite in more people into the workforce, into the contractor space, and to be able to do the clean energy work that needs to be done. So this is where I'll talk a little bit about some of the programs that we've developed and the way we think that they can, at least on this scale, but could, also be expanded and scaled up to address even more of the issue. So here in Seattle, we have an HVAC and refrigeration training academy. So this is particularly targeted towards minorities and women, and to get them interested, acquainted with the HVAC space. So it's a 12-week program. There are support services, everything from childcare subsidies, transportation subsidies, and the classes usually happen in the evening. So there's an evening meal that's provided, all to get people, to remove any barriers that could be in place to help them, complete the study program. There are also additional supports in regards to job finding. So resume help, introduction to any potential job opportunities. We also have people from local HVAC companies come in and speak to them directly during the course, and there is a hands-on portion of the course as well. On the flip side, on the employer side, the contractor side, we also have an e-contractor academy. And this is a program that is present in all of our regions across the country. So this is a program that's targeted towards a contracting firm that is owned and operated by a woman or minority owned business, essentially. We focus on those same trades, those MEP trades, weatherization trades, in terms of contractors that we want to see in the academy. But what we provide them with is a 6 to 7 week training program. It's usually about 20 hours in total. Everything from what the clean energy landscape is like, some business acumen skills, anything from strategy to marketing to financing, and really trying to be sensitive to organizations that will be particularly open and flexible to smaller and minority-owned firms. Other things that we do is introduce them to work opportunities. So anytime it is possible and by trade, introducing them to the decision makers within those organizations or projects that can really kind of invite them in, let them know how the contracting with that particular building owner or project owner works, and include them in their business going forward. Two other programs that we have are the Electrical Pathways program that's going to be launched next year. So it's going to be similar to HVAC. It's going to be introducing minority and women-owned and women to different pathways to get into basically electrical careers. So whether that be, directing them towards an electrical apprenticeship program, towards work in solar, or even looking at commercial electrical licensing. So different pathways are available for that, and working specifically with, very good firms that are in the area that are open and willing to accept minority and women employees, and really kind of are in a position to make a really welcoming workspace. For our e-contractor mini series, this is where we really get trade focused or focus on a particular topic. So we've had trainings, for example, on EV installations. We've had trainings on estimating. We've had trainings, or we're planning trainings on heat pump. So it's going to be very focused training for those women and minority-owned firms. So a couple just, when we talked about earlier about solutions and recommendations, these are a couple of the things that we really noticed make for a really successful program. So I think one is obviously being really intentional about reaching out to community-based organizations that are working in the communities that you want to invite in and serve. So we have really close relationships with a lot of those organizations, and work very closely with them, and have two-way conversations about their participants that they've recommended and how that is going. The other thing is wraparound services, in particular for those employees, for those workforce individuals. So making sure that they have as many barriers eliminated as possible so that they can fully participate, have their full attention, and really see if this is a pathway that works for them. Obviously providing support and kind of on-ramp programs and collaboration. I think collaboration is probably one of the main things that makes workforce programs really successful. So working with everything from our labor organizations, unions, obviously the contractors themselves, where they that could potentially hire our employees, and also with, like I said, those community-based organizations. On the other side, with contractors, one of the things that we look for is, again, that collaboration with other community-based organizations, simplifying public contracting whenever possible. There are so many different levels of government, so many different applications and websites, just even agency by agency, even within the same level of government, different types of certification if you're a minority or women or small or disadvantaged. So simplifying any of that makes it a lot easier for smaller minority women-owned firms to participate. Increased outreach. Oftentimes, minority firms don't apply because they don't know that the opportunity exists. So really targeting those community-based firms and organizations that are in touch with minority and women-owned contractors. Prompt payment policies are really helpful. These are smaller firms that really don't have the extra cash sitting around to wait 30, 60, 90, 120 days for payment. So any kind of prompt payment policies that can be instituted can be really, really helpful and make the difference between a minority participating or not. And then, of course, just tracking, how many minority owned firms you're working with. We have some institutions here that don't track it at all and have no idea how well or not well they're doing. So you can't better what you don't know, right? You can't improve upon if you don't know your baseline. And then just a little bit of an anecdote here. So these are some real contractors that have gone through our e-contractor academy. And this is just to kind of paint the picture of, we hire those that look like us. So I will say, for example, on the top left, we have an electrical firm. She has been around for about 3 or 4 years now, veteran-owned business, minority-owned business, and hired another woman as her first hire, another electrician. That second picture. So another electrician, a smaller firm, mostly focused on residential, really capable, really kind of white glove service in terms of what she can do in terms of residential, hired another woman. That second picture, the gentleman owns an HVAC firm. So Black-owned company, hired another Black individual as his first hire. The two pictures with the yellow jackets, that's for Apex Electrical Group. So Black-owned firm, has a really diverse employee set, but has been able to grow tremendously. And that's been a lot through access to networks. He's gotten through a lot of different programs. And also has a really big kind of, division just dedicated to EV installations. So we're really proud of all of our contractors, but also really proud of like the ability they've had to grow within their trades and also hire diverse individuals within their companies. So we think that the more you can expand the base of minority and women-owned firms, the more you can expand the workforce and diversify that workforce that works in each of those trades. So that's my spiel, and I'm sticking to it. Monica Guevara, here is my email and a couple of links. If you have that link to the presentation, please feel free to visit us, connect with us. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Monica. Yeah, feel free to put some more questions in that Q&A section. We have some good ones going already. And I'll pass it off to our next speaker, which is Andy Winslow from NEAP. So feel free to share your screen, Andy.
All right, how are we looking? Does that look good?
Yeah, I can see that.
Excellent. Hello, everyone. My name is Andy Winslow, and I am a senior associate at Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership. I want to thank DOE for inviting me here today. I will be speaking. I'm excited to share some project updates on a DOE-funded project that NEAP has been leading that we call Total Energy Pathways Workforce. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about NEAP. NEAP is known as a regional energy efficiency organization, funded in part by the United States Department of Energy. And you'll see that there are 6 regional energy efficiency organizations that divide up the country. NEAP works with states and communities from West Virginia up to Maine. And later on, you'll be hearing from Maggie, who is from the SIA territory. So we have 2 Rio representatives on today's call. NEAP is a mission-based organization. Our goal is to drive regional collaboration. Partnerships is in our name. And our mission is to drive collaboration in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic so that we can equitably and affordably reduce building sector greenhouse gas emissions through energy efficiency, electrification, and grid integration. Now, before I jump into Total Energy Pathways Workforce, we need to go back in time to 2016 to a previous project that NEAP had worked on called Zero Energy Now. For some level setting here, the workforce in particular I'm talking about pertains to the retrofits of existing buildings. And Zero Energy Now was a pilot program in Vermont. There were 2 phases. The first took place between 2016 and 2017. The second phase was in 2020 to 2022. And Zero Energy Now was approaching retrofits in a holistic manner, and it was combining energy efficiency, such as weatherization and air sealing and efficient appliances, with heating, electrification, and with renewable energy. And these 3 legs of the stool were combined into these really successful projects that saw crazy reductions in energy use and carbon emissions. We can see from this infographic that in the 2016 pilot program that there was 64% reduction in average fossil fuel and grid electric savings. And then in 2020, you can see circled that we had projected savings of 90%. So really, really impactful savings from this model. And what made this model so interesting or innovative, if you will, was taking this retrofit process, which is often has multiple chunks. You have weatherization, you have electrification, you have renewable energy. Each of those is a really big project in its own right. And traditionally, a homeowner would be the one finding contractors, coordinating everything. And that's really confusing. It's time intensive, especially if you don't know much about building science. And it can be daunting financially when you're doing everything disjointedly. Zero Energy Now brought everything together in-house and had contractors who understood how all the pieces work together and did all of the planning, took that away from the homeowner and made it much easier for these projects to get off the ground and to get moving. An LBNL research project on different retrofit models identified that models that combined air sealing with electrification with renewable energy were clear, quote, winners compared to traditional deep retrofits. These projects saved substantially more CO2 at half the cost. So we found that doing these projects all at once was actually more affordable than doing them disjointedly. And then the other thing I want to identify in this slide is this testimonial from a contractor who said, people seek us out, work seems to find us, and the projects are bigger, so the profit margin for time put in is even better. So that demonstrates that whole home retrofits are good for the homeowner and the building owner as well as the contractor because they're getting bigger jobs. So Zero Energy Now was a pilot project that took place in Vermont, but we realized that there was opportunity for this to have a regional impact. So we rebranded this model and we called it Total Energy Pathways. So that's where TEP comes from, Total Energy Pathways. But we realized as we were doing Zen/TEP that there was a barrier of not having enough contractors knowledgeable of whole home retrofits to scale these programs up. So now enters Total Energy Pathways Workforce, where we realized that in order to scale up TEP, to scale up Zen-like projects, we need more sustainable, diversified workforce that focuses on women and BIPOC, and we need them to be qualified to speak to whole home retrofit. So with that scoping in mind, we launched Total Energy Pathways Workforce in collaboration with Building Performance Association, the Building Performance Institute, and Energy Futures Group. And where we started, and Monica really went into this, is the disparity in demographics when we look at the energy efficiency workforce. Someone in the chat posted that I think it was in Michigan, 86% of the workforce are white males. And here is a snapshot from the New England region. We also have a snapshot from the Mid-Atlantic, and that trend is basically across the board. The green line here are white, the percentage of energy workers that are white. The teal line are women in this field, and then the other lines are everyone else. So we can see heavily dominated by white male workers. That's the takeaway from this. So we want to grow the workforce, but we also want to diversify the workforce. Those were two key missions of this project. So there are two components to Total Energy Pathways Workforce. The first is an online resource library. This is links and resources that we pulled from all over the internet, from government programs to non-profits. It has workforce training tips. It has links to internships, paid internships, and learn on the job internships. And the intention of this resource library was thinking about having on-demand resources and how important it was to not have a class that takes place during the workday, because a lot of people can't commit time in the middle of the day. So there's this need for materials that can be accessed at any time of the day, any day of the week. And that's when we created the online resource library, which is linked on this slide. The other component of Total Energy Pathways Workforce is creating a BPI certificate of knowledge, which we called Total Building Performance. And Total Building Performance specifically targets knowledge areas that are ideal in a contractor workforce that knows about whole home retrofits. We used BPI's, went through BPI's rigorous process for developing a certificate and identified 8 knowledge areas. And then along with these knowledge areas, we created 8 free training modules that are super in-depth and cover everything that would be on the exam. And they are online, they're free, they're accessible at any time of the day. So again, focusing in on that flexibility and on-demand nature, we feel that's really important to attracting a diverse group of candidates. We just at the beginning of October launched the pilot exam for the Total Building Performance Certificate, and that is accessible on the website. It's live right now. You can look at the training and take the exam from there. So a little bit more about Total Building Performance. What is it? What niche does it fill? So, you know, we see that there is a large building stock in need of upgrades. States are setting goals, like in New York, they have a goal to retrofit 2 million homes by a certain year. More and more states are using retrofits as a metric for success in terms of climate goals and equity goals. So there's this huge building stock in need of upgrades. There is a growing demand from climate and cost conscious homeowners and building owners who want to do something but don't know quite how. And TBP fits into all of this by giving workers the knowledge of how to implement whole home retrofit projects that reduce energy bills and reduce the carbon emissions from homes. So that's how TBP fits together. There are, on my next slide, I have the 8 different knowledge areas. This is a screenshot of the training module landing page. So this is what you would see. The training modules start with designing a building project and what decarbonization looks like, goes into financial analysis, communication with clients, we think is really important to make sure that the relationships are strong. The next module is about energy modeling and how to balance all of the different efficiency measures that you're packing into one project and how they complement or de-complement each other. There is building science principles. There is information about greenhouse gas emission calculations, looking at embodied carbon and the emissions from power plants and the emissions from fossil fuel fired equipment in the home. We have a whole section on electrification technologies. And finally, to round things out, we have training on a post retrofit process. I feel like it's not uncommon for electrification or new technologies to be installed in a house, and then the contractor gets out and the homeowner doesn't quite know how to use everything efficiently. They might end up using more energy than they had been before by misusing equipment. They might think the equipment is broken. So we have a section here on how to pass off the project to the homeowner so that they know how to efficiently live in their house and get the most efficiency and comfort out of it, and have contact with you maybe after the project to see how things are going. So those are all things that are worked up in the training modules and about TBP. And the other thing to note about TBP is that the exam itself is an online exam and can be taken at any time. So again, the flexibility of timing is so important when you're trying to reach new audiences. And then communication and outreach is really key. when we're thinking about these goals of growing and diversifying. And Monica hit this really well in her presentation about working with community-based organizations and those organizations on the ground who have direct connections with your target audience. NEEP fully understands that we are not the correct messenger to those audiences. We don't have those connections. So we are looking for different pathways, different organizations to partner with that can spread our message. One idea that our group had recently, using some of our strengths, because one of our project partners is a state legislator in the state legislature, and she is familiar with a woman in government organization, and we will be reaching out to them to see if they know of other women-based organizations or BIPOC organizations that that they could spread the message to. So it's kind of finding the right partners to market along. That's something we are in the process of doing to reach these different populations. Part of our marketing and outreach is going through the Building Performance Association and Building Performance Institute, who both have really big networks of contractors in their networks. But we are looking to break out of that. So if any of you have ideas of organizations we should talk to, please let me know, because we are running the pilot exam until the end of the year, and we're looking to get as diverse a group as possible for that exam. And as a part of this, we plan on doing targeted outreach to trade associations and also to trade schools. So that is a little bit about what NEEP is doing on the workforce front. We are looking ahead. There is all of this funding coming from the Inflation Reduction Act, particularly the training for residential energy contractors, which is the contractor training grant pool of money. And we're hoping that the total building performance certificate, as well as the training materials, could be leveraged as states develop their own training programs using this money. It might look like the certificate being used as a qualifier in one of the programs, or it might just be our training materials being used. But in any case, we're hoping that the work we've done will help train a new workforce that has decarbonization on top of mind and understands whole building concepts. We see the total building performance certificate as being great for many different groups of people. It's great for contractors. We could see this being used for program administrators who are administering retrofit programs. We even see this being used for a growing group of people, which in Massachusetts are known as community coaches. And these are it's people who are in the community, neighbor to neighbor, giving third-party advice on how to retrofit a home, how to heat pumps work, what works for me. And we see all of these different as different areas where TBP could be used. So there's a lot of opportunity for total building performance, and we really are trying to target it towards different groups to try and diversify and grow the workforce. And before I sign off, I just wanted to give a shameless plug for an in-person workshop that NEEP is hosting in New Haven, Connecticut on the topic of heating electrification. The link, I provided a link at the bottom of this slide, and we are looking for more registration, so we hope to see you there. And any questions can be directed to here's my email, Andy Winslow.
Thanks, Andy. We've had a lot of good questions come in from both speakers so far. So excited to get to those at the end here. We have one more really awesome speaker that's gonna tell us about stuff going on in the Southeast. So Maggie, Kelley, Riggins with SIA, take it away when you're ready.
Absolutely. And Corey, can you confirm that you can see everything?
Yes, looks good.
Perfect. Hey, all, it is great to be here. I'm excited to be sharing some of the work that we do at SIA. My name is Maggie Kelley Riggins. I lead the building portfolio at the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance. I've been at SIA for just about 5.5 years, and really excited to talk to y'all about what we do, what we're curious about, what we don't know, and maybe what we need y'all's help with. So a little bit about SIA. Andy did a great job of kind of laying out what a RIO, or Regional Energy Efficiency Organization, is, but we are one of those. Our name is a little deceiving because when it comes to building energy codes, we not only serve 11 states in the Southeast, but the US islands, climate zones, do something crazy, right? And so we serve 18 states and territories. When it comes to thinking about building energy codes, building energy efficiency. And really and truly, the why we do our work at SIA is to work to optimize the impact of energy use, really to think about the quality of life for the people who are in our region, right? As much as we care deeply about carbon and electricity use and those kinds of pieces, which are very critical for the success of humans, right? We like to think on that human outcome piece, which will really kind of focus into a lot of our conversation today. I put our values on here too, largely because we try to make sure that the work that we do, including that around building energy codes, sits in our values, that we at SIA and our partners have the ability to take initiative to earn trust, to show and display the value that we have for others, and to pursue equitable solutions. And so my hope is that in our work, you'll be able to see some of that today, and join us on our journey to explore our values in the building energy code space. Before I get started, and some of y'all are on the call, I see all your names. Hey, Costco, I saw your chat. I wanted to note some of our building energy codes partners. This is not all of them by any means, but when I'm talking about our building energy codes workforce in particular, these are groups that SIA currently has worked with to really understand how to successfully train, educate, resource, and expand the building energy codes workforce in our region. If you're not up here and you want to work with us, let me know. Happy to chat. We're always looking to build bigger tents, but I wanted to give a specific shout out to these folks who have been doing some incredible work with us over the last few years. I want to kind of start with a little bit of level setting about where energy codes are in our region. The Southeast, as compared to majority of the other regions, lags behind. Most of our states have an effective code level of about the 2009 IECC. This is an average, so some are actually below that with amendments. And some are, kind of have the cover of the 2018, but really have amended down to the 2009 level. And then on the commercial side, an effective level of around * 90.1 2016 version. And of course, that varies. It looks different everywhere. But when we're thinking about workforce, we like to think about it in the side of having the supply of workforce, but also the demand for building energy codes workforce. And what we recognize here is that policy, some of that which is not as progressive as it is in some other parts of the country with energy codes, policy is a demand mechanism. So as we see policies increasing or changing, we recognize that will also, ask for more on the workforce side, ask for more people to be completing this work. We also recognize and know that in our region, energy code enforcement is primarily at the local jurisdiction level, especially in states with high building volume. This actually recently shifted in the state of Louisiana, where not all enforcement was done at the local jurisdiction level, and it's actually done by the Office of the State Fire Marshal, but that has shifted in the last, it's October, so 5 months. I think what's really important to note here too is that though there is a need for building energy codes workforce, very clearly at local levels, we have energy codes. The demand piece is somewhat missing, and then the resourcing for that is as well. In similar pieces to what Monica and Andy have shared today, and maybe what you've experienced where you live and where you work, we have similar challenges when it comes to the energy codes in our workforce in general. Our energy training and inspections are not well resourced, whether that's at the local level, at the state level. While there is training, and all of those partners I just showed do excellent work, we at SIA try to really enhance our training environment, it's not sufficient at all times, and we're trying to understand better how to fill those gaps and meet those needs on the technical side, on the wraparound services side, really making sure that there's pieces around understanding energy and energy codes. But we also know that those departments, our building departments, are not necessarily fully resourced for folks to spend a lot of time in and around energy, and trying to understand how we might start to shift that. We have limited field resources for energy code compliance, and this really goes into the next bullet of there is currently not a code above 2009 or 2013, ASHRAE 2013, that isn't amended in some way or another. And so there's a lot of confusion in the field. If you're a contractor who works on the Georgia and the South Carolina border, or maybe on the Alabama, Tennessee border, you might be doing and meeting different codes in different places, even if you're technically both at the 2009 or 2015 because of those amendments. And therefore, right, having those varied training resources for in the field, that demand becomes really complex. And then additionally, similar to other folks, we're having growing vacancies in our building departments, and kind of understanding how to grow the general workforce, right? At the same time as trying to understand what that diversification and representation strategy looks like. So workforce diversity in the Southeast. I want to start with a caveat that the data that I'm going to walk through is not the whole picture. This is information that is pretty much only workforce. And in the energy efficiency workforce table on your right-hand side, it doesn't include building officials. There's only a handful of industries that are attached to energy efficiency represented in this, and there might be some other industries that you may think of as energy efficiency workforce group that isn't represented in this data. So the data is limiting, and we'll talk about that as well. But I want to draw our attention to what this says, and this is actually the same report that Andy shared with his Northeast information. This is information from the Southeast. The Southeast has a good bit of racial diversity. In fact, according to the Brookings Institute, the Southeast has the highest representation of Black residents in the United States. That 58% of the nation's Black residents live in my region. And have some of the counties that have the overall highest diversity in the country exist in the populations that I get to serve at SIA. And when I look at these pieces, right, our overall workforce, when we look at race and ethnicity in particular, we'll look at gender in a moment. We have, if you look kind of all the way at the bottom, the blue square is around the regional average. About 3% identify as Asian. A little over a quarter identify as Black, 5% identify as Hispanic, around 70% identify as white, and then that remaining 4% is other, which could be prefer not to say, maybe multiple races or ethnicities. And so that's our kind of regional average when it comes to workforce. But when we dig down into the energy efficiency workforce, we start to look at some differences and some changes. What is interesting in particular, and I will say about this data and the way that it is collected currently, the non-Hispanic and Hispanic identifying folks are included in the white category. So that is a data limitation that we have. But what's really interesting here is that our Asian population in our region is actually overrepresented in the workforce, which is very interesting for us to learn and to see comparatively to the overall workforce. Our white workforce is around 76% compared to 70% of the overall workforce. And what I really want us to pay attention to is that second full column, or the column of folks who identify as Black. I mentioned before that 58% of the nation's Black residents reside in our region, and only about 25% of the overall workforce is Black, and less than 10% of the energy efficiency workforce is Black. And that gives us like a couple of pieces to kind of think about. Additionally, we started to look at gender, and in the United States, generally, women represent about 50% of the population. And I am going to talk in the gender binary today, because that's how a lot of the data has been collected so far. And so that's what we'll use for today's conversation. Our hope is that we'll have more expanded information in the future. But what's really interesting about that 50% of population being women is that 50% or 57% of women, according to the Department of Labor, or 57% of the general workforce is women right now, which is, as of March 2023, it's higher than ever. And we expect, and several labor organizations expect this to start to decline, largely because some of the childcare efforts that were funded through the COVID-19 pandemic are starting to decline. So we expect some of that to shift. But those are very high numbers. But when we look at energy efficiency workforce in the Southeast for females, we're less than a quarter, right? Although that the general workforce in the United States is 57% women, or identify as women, 24% of the energy efficiency workforce in the Southeast are identified as women. And I think what really is helpful for us in this data, and I joked with one of our folks, is like, it's very similar to like duct leakage and air leakage. It's like, you can't manage what you don't know what you don't know, and you can't start to design programs and think about representative workforces if you're not sure what information you do have, right? And at CIA, when we started to look at this information, we recognized that we have to work to increase the representation of women and workers of color, specifically the Black workforce. And based on this data and information, we recognize that we have to make sure that we are providing resources, tools, and materials that are in multiple languages. That's going to be a big piece of that. And here's a picture. I'm there with Commissioner Lewis from the Public Service Commission in Louisiana, and several folks who are a part of the Building Trades Academy in New Orleans. As you can see, it's a pretty diverse group. We had about 40 students with us that day in July. And there were, I think, about 5 women in that group, right? And so we really are trying to think strategically and in a holistic way about what it really means to have a representative workforce, particularly in the building energy code space. So, like I said, you can't measure what you don't, you can't manage what you don't measure. And I think that when we started to really intentionally ask these questions, we recognized that no one really had a lot of the information that we were looking for. The teams that we've worked with weren't capturing demographic information. We knew how many people were coming to trainings, or generally what the training kind of efficacy was when we were gathering information, but we didn't really know our demographic breakdowns. And so some of the questions that we have at CIA right now is that, one, we want to gain some demographic understanding of building officials across our region. I think nationally too, obviously, but specifically in our region, Like I said, that USEER report doesn't actually have building officials as a part of it. And so really narrowing down and being in this building energy workforce will be really interesting. The other piece, I think, is understanding the demographic breakdown of the folks that we at SEIA directly work with and train. We are really interested in that because we want to make sure, right, that goal that we had that I just shared on the last slide is that we need to find out who we're engaging with right now from a demographic standpoint. Some other pieces when we think about diversity, it's not just what you look like, how you present, what you identify as, but also what your needs are. And so we have specific interest as well in understanding what people's learning needs are of our trainees, of folks in our region. Are there specific pieces of, actually, I do need digital. I need to stop and start because I have neurodivergence and I need to pay attention for 20 minutes and break for 10. Whatever that need is it need to be in person? Does it need to be hands-on? Does it need to be in plain language? And we'll talk more about that in a second, but really understanding what the specific learning needs of our folks are. And then additionally, breakdown of folks who need additional accommodations to join or feel comfortable in our industry. I think somebody in the chat asked a question about veterans with disabilities, and that is actually a very large population of folks that we're trying to understand what that looks like and where they can feel pride, joy, and excitement within our industry, and that those are the piece, right? What are these additional accommodations? And then lastly, which tools, resources, and information are the most critical to have in varying languages? It would be nice to have everything in every language, but what we know and we've learned is that not everything is necessarily helpful to have in every language, and that when we are talking about translation of technical information, a lot of the time it's not a one-to-one translation. You can't just stick it in Google Translate. There's an interpretation factor, and so making sure that we're empowering and understanding those services are really important, and making sure we start with the critical information that's needed will help us get those pieces out sooner and in a quicker fashion. And we're trying to learn more, right? So when I say like these are things that we don't know, and here's how we're trying to do it. So we are surveying everyone that comes into contact with us, with our partners, and looking to continually build program design for inclusion based off of that information. We're doing this in a couple of, and kind of across our work, but in these three specific Building Energy Code program funded partnerships. So we have a benefit award, the Advanced Ready Workforce Southeast, working on advanced building technologies, the Building Energy Code program technical assistance. We're a part of that technical assistance network at SEIA, and then our Energy Code Circuit Rider program, which is also under the technical assistance, but operates in several of our states and is actually actively expanding. And so making sure that we're starting to actually gain insight on who we're touching, who we're supporting, who we're giving resources to. And then working to think about workforce partnerships in the energy efficiency space in our region. We're learning a ton from those who are already kind of got it figured out. With the Georgia Building Trades Academy here in Atlanta, and it's actually, I don't think y'all can see that closely out of our window, but I can see it from here. We work really closely, and we're learning more and more about them and the work that they do. Actually, my little brother just started the program last week, which is very exciting to see someone join, and he's looking at working in the HVAC space in particular. But the space of what does recruitment look like for youth, but specifically youth of color and women? It's really kind of their focus lately. And actually one of the photos here is of a welding station in their building just down the street from me here in Atlanta. And then we're working with one of the Resilient Energy Code implementation projects in Louisiana, really thinking about building out support networks. How do we make sure people get certifications and have financial support and understanding the pathways within our industry, kind of like what Monica was sharing earlier, right now we're even just curious, like, what's the pathway to becoming a building official look like? And what are the varying pathways so that we can help folks kind of see themselves in that process? And then lastly, really thinking about evaluating tools and resources for language and inclusion. Spanish language availability is very critical in our region. I am fortunate to be able to work with Puerto Rico quite a good bit, but also, just making sure people have access to information in one of the largest language sectors in our country. We have been working actively with EPA Energy Star and Energy Star's portfolio manager to get that available in Spanish. It's currently not, and that's actually keeping for Puerto Rico from really realizing and kind of working in and around a building performance standard, right? If folks can't actually access and work in that tool to report information, using plain language wherever possible. We are a wonky group and we love an acronym. I think there's like 12 on this page, right? We love an acronym. And so making sure that we can be as plain as possible where possible is really, really critical, because we can scare people away from the work that we do really quickly. And then lastly, the neurodivergence and reading challenges. The work we do is dense. I don't know, last time y'all picked up a code book, I've got a box of them across the room. But the work is really dense. And so thinking about how we create resources and tools for folks whose brains just work differently, then make sure that we can actually access the information and become a part of something that is really making big moves for the US, for the Southeast in our case. And we are not by any means do we at SIA have the answers, but these are the pieces and the spaces that we are actively investigating, that we're curious about. We are happy to share our surveys, which we've developed in partnership with DOE and the Building Energy Codes program, but our surveys, our curiosities, our contacts, the pieces in the way that we're thinking about this, because we know that we're not the only ones who are really working to investigate, interrogate the system that we live in, and think about building energy codes as a wider and as a big tent, quite frankly. So that is all that I have for y'all today. But thank y'all for letting me come and share, and I hope to see some of y'all pop up in the Southeast.
Thanks so much, Maggie, and all of our awesome speakers, Monica and Andy as well. We have a little bit of time here for some questions. Before that, we are going to throw the link in the chat. If you are wanting to get CEUs from AIA or a certificate for ICC or other professional orgs. So click that link, fill it out now, or have it up in your browser to fill it out later. So you'll need that, and I'll send that information out to everyone after this as well. And yeah, we got about 10 minutes, a lot of amazing stuff. We had so many great questions in the chat that Monica was really answering, and we're all seeing and thinking about. So thank you so much for those. I wanted to kind of start with one that I think could apply to everyone. That was a comment in the chat that was answered, but I think I'm curious what y'all think about it. So, where there was this comment saying, would love to see disabled veterans included in the survey numbers. And I guess a question from that I have is kind of, are there certain groups that you've noticed are not represented in the workforce or in surveys that either from your specific areas or just in general that you are actually working to include in the workforce or in your surveys?
I would say for us, in addition, so before we were tracking solely veterans, and now we're trying to track disabled veterans versus non. I think the other group is thinking about gender binary, thinking about LGBTQIA plus populations and how we just account for those. It's not that they're not in the industry, it's that we just don't know how many, or if they would, in particular on the contractor side, if they want to be identified versus not. So I will say one of the individuals in the picture that we focused on, the second picture there, does identify as LGBTQIA and is actually a part of a chamber that is focused on those contractors, on those individuals. So I think just even keeping better track of that would be helpful for us.
Yeah, I shared a little bit about who we don't know about, but I think to the question on disabled veterans, one of the pieces that we don't track as well in our region is veterans in general. We have a lot of folks who are retiring or getting ready to retire or exit the military. I actually grew up on now Fort Moore, was Fort Benning, so very tied into the military myself, and kind of really thinking about what does that process look like to start the advertisement, the intake to the building energy codes and energy and efficiency space as they are ready and working to exit. I think that, you know, DoD does a great job helping folks transition, but really thinking about the veterans segment in general. Obviously, the groups of folks that leave that with disabilities or with other accommodation needs. But for us in the Southeast in particular, we know that we have a lot of or some indigenous groups throughout our region, not as much as other regions due to forceful removal. But because of that, it's not a very easy group to track and to understand how to bring into the work that we do in the Southeast in an intentional, meaningful way that really can start to shift that conversation and bring those groups and those folks into our space. We want to explore what that looks like at SIA, but knowing that those groups are somewhat far few between. We're working with a few in Louisiana, but wanting to expand that. It's not in a lot of the data, though, right? It's not really collected at a national level.
Yeah, I think what both Monica and Maggie had identified was like the data that we're restricted by the data that we have, and the data that we've been using to track all of these demographic informations come from the energy for the future energy efficiency jobs report. I think the new one was just released, so it's hard for us to get more granular than that. But something that we are really interested in terms of CVP is folks' education level, and we have an optional demographic intake form for signing up for the pilot exam that asks some demographic questions like race and gender, but then it also asks education level and experience, like do you have other certificates, have you gone to school, and so we're planning on analyzing all of that information to eventually determine what the correct prerequisite is for total building performance, and so that we can make sure that we are tailoring it for the groups that we would want it to be tailored for.
Thanks. Got another couple of questions for Andy about TVP. A couple of people were wondering if there is, for retrofit contractors, it makes sense. Is there any way that it could be applicable to new construction builders and those working with the energy code?
Yeah, so obviously, it's really tailored for retrofit homes and buildings. I think a lot of the skills that it teaches are applicable to new construction, like how to energy model the home and figure out the best combination of features, but in no way is it a replacement for specific new construction trainings. There's a lot of skills there that it does not train for. But I think that if you are a contractor who works in both realms, that it would definitely, there would be some benefit in the new construction field. In terms of building codes, that is not in the scope of the certificate.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and there's a lot of good energy code training programs out there as well. So I think it fills a good space for existing buildings, that the program. I know you answered this via text, Monica, but I wondered if you could chat about it here as well. There's a question about career pathways and for comparison, can you give examples of other career pathways that are more visible to certain target populations?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and I'll answer it more locally because it does vary by region and population. So at least here in Washington, there is a significant Latinx population, and they're probably overrepresented in kind of the entry-level positions in weatherization. And we even see that a little bit in the ownership within weatherization firms, at least closer to urban areas in Washington area. The other area where we see representation of minority populations is Asians in engineering. And so I think that's a factor of a couple different things. One is just the population makeup of our state. We do have significant Latinx populations. We do have significant Asian populations. And we do have very highly educated Asian populations, especially because we have this tech area full of Microsoft and Amazon and all of that. So a lot of those individuals or even their children have, are highly educated and can go into those engineering fields. I think one really interesting anecdote, and I won't go into too much detail, but if anyone listens to the Freakonomics podcast, there is an excellent podcast that is about the whaling industry and what we can learn in terms of diversity from it. So I won't bore you with all the whale anecdotes, but the basic gist of it is that for businesses, whaling companies that went out and were solely one population or had just a small amount of, diverse populations on there, they did okay or all right. Once they got to a certain amount of diversity, a certain threshold, they actually became more profitable than those that weren't diverse. So I say all that to say that there does seem to be some sort of threshold, some sort of kind of snowball moment, right? Where there's enough momentum, there's enough kind of forward movement, there's enough knowledge within those target populations that they want to get in the field. So I think, like, in my ideal world, there would be like these beautiful marketing, segments and pieces and videos and TikToks and other things and platforms I'm not on, but like that would show like the diversity of like, just like, I would love to see like the Beyonce of like electricians on there and the Riri of like HVAC and just all of these wonderful individuals represented in all their diversity and glory, and have those be, both on like a very large scale and even on small local scale, because we find that a lot of the workforce that gets in and stays in the industry are because of those informal networks. They know someone, they have an uncle, a partner, a godfather, a compadre, something that is in the industry. So the more we can kind of like build that up, whether it's kind of artificially or just, via those informal networks, I think the better off we'll be.
Yeah, thanks so much. We have just a couple minutes here. I'm gonna throw our last question to Maggie, and then all of you can chime in as well, because I think it'd be interesting to hear what everyone thinks. You spoke a bit about how policies kind of help create that demand for a workforce. So we had a question about what are some of these policies that are needed to ensure that we have a demand for workforce, like energy audits in order to receive certificates of occupancy. So start with Maggie, and then you guys can jump in as well.
Happy to note that. It's actually Costco and I have been somewhat working on, and that is a movement that we are working on here in the Southeast, of thinking about how we can make sure that there is an energy audit in order to have a certificate of occupancy, and that gives people vital information, right, about their systems, and increases energy auditor workforce, right? But additionally, I think just building energy code updates in general. The state of Louisiana just updated their building code from an amended 2009 version to a slightly amended, and we can talk about that later, version of the 2021 IECC, but it's a huge jump, right? Huge jump in Louisiana. And we are seeing the need for air leakage testing and duct leakage testing for the first time. We're seeing the need to think about how we frame walls differently, right? Just having the multiple components of a building, and that's in the building energy code, we are seeing that growth. When you also update those and there's more to comply with on the builder and contractor side, there's more work to be done on the building official side too, right? And we don't want to leave that out of the conversation. And so making sure that that demand increases as well when we see a code update. We're hoping to see a lot of demand in the Southeast over the next bit, with code updates in particular. But I'm always happy to chat about what that demand looks like. And DOE actually has a lot of really good resources on energy workforce demand policies. So happy to share those as well after the webinar.
Andy, Monica, do you have any thoughts on that as well? Oh, the question, yeah, to reiterate, the question is just, what are some policies that you think are necessary to ensure that there is demand for a growing workforce?
Yeah, so I think my work differs from maybe some of this audience who might be focused more on new construction. I'm more focused on retrofits. And a lot of my work is focused on benchmarking and building performance standards, which create standards that buildings need to, perform at. And that definitely creates demand for retrofit and efficient technologies. NEEP also works on residential energy labeling, which is when you put a value on the efficiency of a home and attach it to the value of a house. So like when you sell your house, an efficient home would cost more than a non-efficient home. And, adding those incentives and making the efficiency visible creates demand, which then creates, job openings to fill that demand.
I think that we're really thinking about where the demand already is, and not necessarily wanting to rely on policy to create that. I think just having seen like the energy auditor kind of like push, in the ARA era, and not having that much work for those energy auditors, like there's a little hesitancy around that, and doing a repeat of that. But I think there are certain areas just in electrification and energy efficiency that are going to have long ramp up periods and lots of demand for the foreseeable future. So I think we're focusing on preparing individuals for those careers, so we don't have to worry about the policy piece as much.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you guys all for being here. I think we had some really amazing presentations and questions. I know we had some more questions than we were able to get to. So we'll do our best to, if the presenters are willing to write out some answers to those, we'll send them out to you all. The recording will be available next week sometime. Presentation is available now. And once again, please go ahead and fill out that form to get your CEUs. Yeah, that's it for today's session. We, like I said, we'll have a few more of these going forward in this series. So please join one of our future webinars. Once again, get the link to your CEUs and visit either of these links to learn more about the DOE Building Energy Codes program. I think that's it for us. Thanks all for being here, and look out for an email from me in the coming days and next week. So thank you so much.